What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the ARC podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Zachary. And if you're new tuning in, thank you for joining. This is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast, where we talk all things mental performance in sports. On this show, we dive deep into the mental side of sports, and our guest this week is Dr. Bobby Lowe, a mental performance coach and doctor at BYU, someone who has been in the mental performance and sports psychology space for the last 15 years. Dr. Lowe's story is powerful because he didn't just study his work, he lived it. As a college pole vaulter, he went through the same battles so many athletes face: frustration in competition, self-doubt, feeling like his confidence disappeared when he reached the next level, and getting pulled into outcome-based thinking that made it hard to stay present and perform. After connecting with different mentors, he began training the mental side the same way he trained his body, and that work completely transformed his athletic career. He went from a mid-level collegiate athlete to winning conference championships, becoming a multiple-time All-American, and competing professionally while training for the 2012 Olympic cycle. Ultimately, an injury ended his competitive career, but then his transition came into the mental performance space, working with athletes. Helps athletes sharpen focus, manage their emotions, and eliminate mental interference so they can unlock what they're physically capable of. In this conversation, we get into identity versus performance, who you are versus what you do, the power of self-talk and focus cues, how athletes can find the right emotional zone to compete in, and even how the NIL landscape adds a new layer of mental pressure at the collegiate level. We also hear a sneak peek of Dr. Lowe's upcoming book, Wiring Intelligence, where he breaks down the difference between reactive patterns that hijack performance and proactive patterns that elite athletes train on purpose, which includes a lot of his personal experiences through sport and the mental performance space. This was an awesome episode, and I hope you guys enjoy. Lo, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and taking time out of your day to speak with the two of us about mental performance in sports. How are you doing today?
Great. Doing great. Happy to be here. Looking forward to a fun conversation.
Yeah, no, we are as well. We're really excited to kind of pick your brain and go through your journey and a lot of the work that you've been able to do. So, just like we start every episode, I'm going to put the ball back in your court, let you introduce yourself and go through the journey of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My name is Dr. Bobby Lowe. I'm a mental performance doctor. I've been in the field about 15 years now. And really, how I got into this field was through my own sport experience, which isn't uncommon. I think a lot of people that jump into this field have been players or athletes at some point and kind of have recognized the importance of the mental side of the game to competing at a high level and performing your best. And so then, they want to get in and contribute and help other athletes train there. And I think that was really my experience. I was a track and field athlete. My sport was my event was the pole vault, and I excelled in high school and I did pretty well and got a chance to go to college and compete at the collegiate level, but it was in my first couple of years there that I really struggled. I would get frustrated in competitions. I had a lot of self-doubt. My confidence felt like where my confidence was good in high school, when I got to the next level, and everybody else is good too, right? Like my confidence disappears, right? I found myself not being able to control my thoughts or control my emotions really well, and I was fortunate enough to be at a place where I then connected with a friend and a mentor now, but he was my mental performance coach at the time. But his name is Dr. Craig Manning, and he started to train me on all the skills and all the elements and all the factors that help unlock our physical performance when we're on the track, right? And so started training with him. I had a pretty transformational experience. Went from kind of being this mid-level guy to I won a couple of conference championships. I was a multiple All-American. Went on to compete professionally for 3 years, training for the 2012 London Olympic Games. My sport career ended because of a foot injury, but by that time I'd fallen in love with the sports psychology side of things, that I was ready to go and pursue that path. And so I ended up moving across the country for me, but really to the Midwest, and going and studying at the University of Missouri with a really one of the legends in sports psychology. His name is Dr. Rick McGuire.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what sent me on this journey. Since then, I've done a lot of projects with different organizations, USA Track and Field, professional athletes here and there, some other universities around. But currently, I'm working as a mental performance doctor. So my day to day is I get to work with the players and the teams and specifically train them on how to unlock their physical skills using their mind. So kind of a dream job. I get to be in my hometown. I get to be at my alma mater, and then I get to be training these players and athletes on how to use the mental side.
Yeah, no, that's great, and thank you for sharing your journey and, looking up kind of your accomplishments as an athlete. That's awesome, and I love to hear that it inspired you, that your journey kind of inspired you to get into this field specifically. Now, I'd love to hear from your perspective because you touched on it, that an injury kind of ended, I guess, that dream for you of competing in the Olympics, right? What did that time period look like for you? I guess what was that identity shift for you? We've had a lot of athletes come on here who have maybe gravitated towards something post playing. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people, I guess, grapple with that fate much differently. So I'd love to hear from your perspective how you shifted from an identity as a track athlete to working in mental performance in sports.
Yeah. This is actually a thinking pattern that we work on with players even now at the collegiate level. And the reality is for all of us, age is the undefeated element out there, right? For all of us, eventually our sport, our athleticism, we're gonna hit our maximum, and then we're going to start going down, right? So it's essentially inevitable that we will transition out of high level competitive sport and into other things. And so one of the things that we do particularly now, and this helped me when I was a player, but we will specifically separate the two things. And what I mean by that is when it comes to your identity, that's who you are, right? And so we actually want to build an identity, and we build that through skills. We build that through our thinking patterns, through the words and the language that we use in our own mind, right? But we build the identity, but the identity then is who I am, but that's separate from what I do. And what I do as an athlete is, well, I participated in track and field, right? And so we do a lot of work, a lot of mental work to try and separate the two. One is who I am, and the other is what I do. And so we'll even start that process. We'll get freshmen that come on campus right now, and we'll start that process of really building true confidence, true self-belief, true motivation really starts with, okay, what's my identity? Who am I? Right? And that's bigger than sport. I'm a student, I'm a family member, usually brother, sister. At BYU, we get husbands and fathers and mothers. And so you're a family member, you're a community member, you're an athlete, you're a student, right? So we try to shape the identity around that, and then build real confidence or true confidence around what do I do in my sport, right? So we
Yeah.
kind of separate the two. So for me, my own personal experience was really I had started doing a lot of that work before, because I was a little bit unique in my story. When I was graduating college, so this would have been 2009, I was married and we had our first child. I'd been married for 2 years. We'd had our first child. I actually have some pictures of standing on the podium with the other NCAA athletes, and I'm holding my kid and receiving the medal, right? And which is just totally unique, right? Like there isn't anybody else out there doing that, right? Or very, very few, I should say.
Yeah.
But for me, like I had already started shifting my identity or building the identity around, like, hey, you're a father and you're a husband and you also participate as a track and field athlete, right? So I think being married and having our first child helped me realize or build other pieces of that identity, so that as I transitioned out of sport and into sports psychology, it really was about, okay, I gave it my all. I trained, I gave it my all. I left everything I could on the track. I now need to go and be a dad and be a father and provide for a family, and I love the mental side of sport. I'm going to go and do that. And so actually for me it was a little bit of an easy transition where I didn't experience some of the same types of things that some of these young athletes experience, in terms of like when the sport gets ripped away from you, now you ask these big questions like, who am I? Or what am I going to do? Right. And so really that was my experience. But even now at BYU, we spend a lot of time starting to build that early so that when they do graduate or move on to their other things, they're carrying a strong identity with them and not experiencing a lot of the emotions or the thoughts that come from just like having your sport ripped away from you a little bit.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that about separating, the sport is what I do, but that's not who I am, which is awesome. And I love hearing that because, a lot of youth athletes, especially, I think that's super important. And I think a lot of people face that question, like you said, without the sport, what am I? Because I've identified for Matt and I growing up, I'm a baseball player. For you, it's like I am a track athlete, and that was it, right? There's like no other thought in your head, but like you said, being able to kind of mature early and understand that and be like, I'm a lot more than just a track athlete. And I think the perfect representation, right? You said you're on the podium holding your child. That's beautiful. That's awesome. But I'd love to go back to that time period you said when you were an athlete still and you were facing kind of those mental ruts that you alluded to when you were going through your journey. And, you said you were working with a mentor at the time and someone who was helping you out and helping you on the mental performance side of your game. What were some of the things that maybe the two of you implemented that really stuck with you during that time period? Because I'm sure it's changed kind of the, I guess, practices and training methods from that point to now. I'd love to hear during that time period what really stuck with you and what were your main takeaways.
Well, yeah, and I still remember them very, very well. And maybe both of you as baseball players, you remember either a specific skill or a specific. I don't know if you guys were pitchers or fielders, but
Me a pitcher, and then Matt was a hitter
First
and
baseman.
fielder.
both. We got
Yeah.
both
Yeah,
sides, right? So like,
both sides.
like when something clicks for you in the batter's box, or when you like learn this new, like you finally figure out the grip on this cutter that just moves a mile, right? And so I still remember a lot of those skills for me, implementing them. And actually, I'll tell you the first one. And at the time, I didn't have any language or any words around this. He was just coaching me and said, like, go do this. Go at your practice tomorrow. Like, go do this. And I went and I applied it. But I do remember coming back and I went and I applied it. And first, I had like one of the best training sessions I've ever had. And then I came back and I was like, holy smokes, this actually worked. Like,
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
everything. Tell me everything. But the first skill that he really taught me, and before I tell you the skill, I'll describe maybe the mental rut that I was in. And at the time, my mind, I would get really carried away on specific outcomes of the event or specific results of the type of jump, right? And if anything wasn't ever like either perfect or exactly hit my expectations, I was an angry mess. I was angry. I would throw shoes, I would throw poles. I was like just frustrated, right? And so I go in and I'm talking, his name is Craig, right? But Dr. Manning, I'm talking to him and I'm telling him like, here's where I'm at and I'm a mess. And because carrying a lot of that I call it reactive intelligence, but carrying a lot of that anger, that frustration, those outcome oriented types of thoughts, carrying those into a competition like wildly distracts you, right? Your brain's objective. It only holds one thought at a time. And if you're focused on other things, what are you not focused on? Well, you're not focused on executing the jump successfully to then lead to the best possible outcome, right? If you're on the mound ready to throw a pitch and you're still thinking about that guy that hit a bomb on you, like you're not going to be able to throw and execute precisely, right? So that was the rut that I was in. And there's a lot of kind of there's a lot of what I would call mental blocks in that. One was emotional, one was, my thinking patterns. So I go in, I describe this all to Craig. He turns around, he's like, hey, go do this. And what he taught me was first, he taught me, okay, your words and your language. And so in the sports psychology field, we call this self-talk, right? But he's like, this is where it all starts. This controls everything. You want to control your mind? This is where it starts. You want to control your emotions? This is where it starts. You want to control your physical skills? This is where it starts, right? So he's like, first, your words, right? So now we need to build patterns that you can start to use and say to shape those words. So what he taught me was, the first one that he taught me was task orientation. In sports psychology world, we call it task orientation. But he basically said, hey, describe to me what are the 3 things that you do that help you jump your very best. And I was like, okay, it's this, this, and this. And he's like, great. Shrink them down to 1 word or 2 words. We got to build what we call cues. Those 3 tasks are relevant, focus cues that help you jump your best. And then he starts to describe to me the neuroscience, right? Your brain can only handle one thought at a time. It's objective. So if you say don't miss or don't strike out, like your brain just hears the instruction. It just foretells and forecasts, like exactly do that thing, right? So he said, don't use those types of words. Let's use these words. Let's use proactive, approach oriented words, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're using the words in your mind and you're giving your body the exact instruction to execute the task. Okay. So for me, and these adjusted over time, but I started to focus on, okay, just in pole vaulting, it's really important that you just like grip the pole really tight, like connect with the pole. So that was the first cue. The second cue was once I leave the ground, I need to row the pole, right? So that just means in pole vaulting, everybody thinks it's like a upside down, like a pole, like you pull
Yeah.
yourself, but
Yep.
really it's like rowing a boat. The motion is actually like you're rowing a big long paddle, right? So it's like rowing a boat. And then the last one, when you go upside down, it's like a upside down pull up, right? So then my last cue was okay, you got to pull. So it was grip, row, pull. Those were my cues. And I remember going out to the track, executing those three things, and sure enough, by the end of it, I wasn't frustrated, I wasn't angry. I was starting to see some real progress in my training sessions. And then I was seeing the results too. Like I was jumping higher bars, I was getting onto bigger poles. Like I was having a very productive and effective training session. So that's when I went back and I felt like I was a little kid on like Christmas or something, right? But that's when I went back to Craig and I was like, wow, this really worked. I want to know everything you know.
Love that. That's awesome. So you talked a little bit earlier about just like the transition was a little easy, right? Going from into like the professional space. What if there was like a hard part going from athlete to professional or from the start of being a professional to where you're at now? What would that hardest part be for you?
In the transition,
Mhm.
what was the hardest part about that transition? And this isn't uncommon to a lot of players and athletes that transition. One, if you're lucky enough to get to a place where you get to compete at a high level, right? And for me, I was top 50, I was top 20 in the US, top 50 in the world. And so like you could argue that's a one percenter, right? Like there was 50 other guys in the world better than me, right?
Yeah.
And so I got a chance to compete at a pretty high level. So what that does, like the level of confidence you have and the level of cognitive abilities you have are really, really good around that skill, right?
Yeah.
So then you transition out of sport and mind you, like I had spent 16 years training it.
Hmm.
It's kind of funny. I once did this. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Anders Ericsson and his research around mastery and the
Yes.
10,000 hours. And even though the 10,000 hours isn't like a fixed number, if you hit that, then you're going to be an expert, but really is more of a guideline of like, hey, you have to train a lot and deliberately, right? I once did the math as best I could estimate, and I was in like the 15,000 hour range. And I was like, oh,
Man.
that's cool. You could maybe say I was an expert or something, right? But I think the most difficult piece was like once your confidence and your abilities are at a high level like that, and then you transition to your next thing, where are your skills and your competencies and your abilities,
Yeah.
right? Well, they're going to be way lower. So for me, it was okay. I'm like this elite jumper, and now I'm transitioning into the sports psychology world where like I'm a novice again.
Mm,
Okay, I got to go study, I got to go learn, I got to go get the education, right? And so from there, it was once I started really focusing and studying the sports psychology stuff. Yeah, it was like another 6 years of education, and then you got to get into practice and you got to train, and you're making mistakes and errors, you're testing things, and so I think that was the toughest piece is knowing that like okay, I'm going from this level down to this level in a new discipline,
mhm.
but then still being able to maintain those higher level cognitive abilities, right? Like, okay, I'm moving to call it a new sport, your job, your
Right.
career.
Yeah.
I'm moving to a new sport. I'm not as good as I was in this other thing, but that shouldn't change my mindset, right? I believe I can go and learn. I'm motivated. I love this. I love this discipline. I want to get better at it. I can demonstrate grit and push and study and learn. I'm resilient, so when there's setbacks, I can bounce back. I can build my confidence in this new discipline. I'm a good sports psychology practitioner, and I've seen some results. players have gone out to the track or the field or the court and have had that same experience and come back and told me like, holy smokes, Dr. Lowe, it worked.
Yeah.
I want to know everything you know. And so I've had those experiences, right? That evidence builds your confidence. I know how to manage and regulate my emotions in, call it, stressful environments. Like, you got to give a training to a team that literally is in the Sweet 16 of their NCAA tournament, and you got to help them get dialed in, right? Like, that could be my high pressure moment, right? You got a kid that's just about to go and run a race in a national championship, right? And they got to perform well, right? I know how to direct my attention and my focus, and then I know how to make great decisions. So even though I was here in that other sport and now I'm moving to this other one, I can still apply the same cognitive ability. So I think the hardest part, Matt, was recognizing, yep, I was here, now I'm moving to here.
Yeah.
But then you just have to apply the same mental skills in that new discipline to build yourself back up to that level.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And can you talk a little bit more about, like, obviously you're all American, right? You're a 1%er in your sport. You're a champion, right? Obviously, like, there's a skill set that comes with that, right? And like, you have a coach, you're getting mental training along the way, and so are others, right? That might be below you or might be above you. What do you attribute to kind of being the separator for you specifically during, let's say, your rise to that point? Or was there something that kind of changed within you, right? You become a husband, you become a father, I'd say, after your sophomore year in college. So kind of that this changes a little bit more. What kind of kept you push a little bit more? What sacrifices did you kind of have to give? And then what really separated you from everyone else?
Yeah. No, I love this question. This is actually a really big question. And so I'm gonna start to answer this question, but also toss out like this shameless plug. And that is, I'm writing a book right now, and I am at the end of it, right? I'm in the editing stage. We want to publish here in, next month. And so like I tell that whole story. So that is definitely something that like I learned, I figured out, I had to spend a lot of time, right? But so shameless plug, writing a book. I tell a lot of those stories in the book.
I love it.
So, but in short, to answer that question, like a lot of pieces came together over time. So to answer the question in short, I would say building the mental strength, like that was the differentiator for me. I had some physical gifts, I had some abilities, I was fast on the track, but all of those physical abilities for me were locked up. They were tied up. In the book, I talk a lot about how the reactive side of our brain, the fight or flight response, like it hijacks your brain. It hijacks you. When that piece of your brain takes over, it blocks all of your physical skills. It's a different part of the brain that is in charge, right? Your decision making, problem solving, memory recall, emotional regulation, like all of the stuff that you need to perform well, out the window, gone.
Right.
And so I had the physical abilities. Then training the mind, that's what unlocked everything for me, right? So I would say that was the thing, but mental strength isn't one skill.
Right.
It's not one thing. Mental strength is a collection of things, right? I like to say if you had a pie or a pizza and there were 8 slices on that pizza, that's what it is. And they all work in harmony together to help you perform your best when it matters most, right? So like I can go out there and have really high self-belief, but if I can't manage my emotions and regulate my emotions in the moment, like self-belief isn't gonna like just automatically make me perform my very best, right? Like I got to do both of them. And that's what I love about training the mind and building mental strength is like you got to develop these things over time. And so I would say like building self-belief was really important. I now believed, okay, I'm a great jumper. I can compete with these other guys. Like I belong out here, right? If I go out and just execute my skills, I can jump this high or even higher, right? And if I jump that high, that means I'm going to be a top 3 guy in the competition. I can control my emotions in NCAA championships but to be candid, like I went to 6 NCAA championships. It took 4 of them, like to figure out like how do you manage and regulate your emotions in this high pressure scenario. So you could argue like I wasted 4 I wouldn't say I wasted. I would
Right.
say I learned in those experiences. So even though I failed and I lost and it wasn't great at performances, like each one of those experiences then taught me, okay, I got to do this a little bit better, or I got to do that a little bit better, right? So I will say this, Matt, because you asked the question about being a dad and being a husband in that moment. I was a little bit out of balance up until that
Mm.
point. Like track and field was me, and I was track and field. Like I lived it, I loved it. My dad was a big contributor to that. He was a world class athlete too, growing up. So like track and field was just our thing. And but when I got to this point, and I write about this in the book in the motivation category, because we get motivated by a bunch of different things, but one of the things we get motivated by is what's our purpose and what's the meaning behind a lot of that stuff, right? So for me, it changed. All of a sudden, my purpose and my meaning was like, I have this kid that I got to take care of. His whole life, or at least the next few years of his life, like are 100% contingent on me not failing, or,
Right.
or at least being able to provide in some kind of way, right? So like that really changed my perspective. All of a sudden, track and field was like this big in the meaning and purpose world, right? It was like, yeah, this is just a cool thing, a fun thing I like to get out and do. But like in terms of what's important in life, track and field was this big. Being a father and a husband, like I'm gonna go out of the screen, right? But like was
Yeah.
Right, of
massive,
course.
right? So that changed. So that changed in me. And so you can imagine a player stepping out into an NCAA championship or into a USA championship. If their identity, going back to that identity question, if their identity and their purpose is just fixed on their sport and only on their sport, that's going to add a lot of extra pressure, a lot of interference, and it could be a distraction to them in that performance. But for me, when I was able to shift and had this other purpose, or these other meaningful elements in my life, all of a sudden that interference from the track side of it was really small. I could have gone out and had the worst performances of my life, and I'm still going home to a wife that loves me, to a brand new kid. Like we're gonna go build this family, and but that was different. I was unique in that. Like not
Right.
every player at the college level has that. Actually, very few have
Yeah.
that, right? But that's what speaks to the importance of having to build an identity that's outside of sport, like we talked about in the beginning. What a cool question, Matt. Sorry we can't spend all day and like walk through each element because it's a lot. But those were just a couple for me that it changed the way I approached and thought about my sport.
Thank you for that. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was great, and I am a husband and a recent father,
Oh,
so
congrats.
thank you, but I can't even begin to imagine trying to balance being a collegiate athlete with being a father, so, I mean, hats off to you because
Hey,
that's fantastic.
no, 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 no. You know this, Brandon. Shout out to my wife,
Of course, you
Yes.
right?
have to.
Like
Yes.
the partner, the companion, like I just got to go and train.
Right, right, right.
But like it's hard to do that by yourself. But shout out, like definitely my wife is the real champion in that whole experience.
Of course. I mean, same here in our house, and I'm not even playing a sport still. Like your wife, obviously, wife mother is the champion of the house, and that's fantastic. But you alluded to it, and we were gonna bring it up, but I'd love you to kind of dive into now your book that is coming out, right? Obviously, maybe give a little sneak peek at the behind the scenes of creating this book, maybe the why, maybe what your vision is for the book and what you're trying to achieve. What do you want the readers to kind of take away from the book that you're coming out with?
Yeah. I'll start by saying this. Your brain actually has a muscle in it that is you can call it the grit muscle, right?
Yeah.
And as we do hard things, like if we literally go out and do something hard that we don't want to do, like that part of the brain grows and expands, right? So what I would say, like if you want to generate and build grit, like go do hard things. Writing a book for me was a really hard thing. I'm 3.5 years into this, and yeah, it's hard. I've probably rewritten the whole thing maybe 4 times.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because you get through it and you're like, I don't really like that, and I don't really love that, and now let's
Yeah.
change this. And at one point, I got up to, I'm in the hundreds of pages, and I'm like, man, people are gonna look at the page count and just throw this away. Okay, how do we shrink it? Like, how do we get more precise and intentional with what we're trying to say? And needless, just all that in mind. Like, if you want to do something hard and strengthen that grit muscle, like, go write a book. Just like take a pass at it. It's a very hard task. All that being said, the, I started writing the book for two reasons. Number one, to organize my own mind, to organize my own mind, my own thoughts, my own frameworks about training mental strength. And that's one of the things, quite honestly, in the field, in the sports psychology field, I felt like was missing a little bit. You have practitioners out there, or you even have, like, I have 3 graduate degrees in sports psychology. Like, but it felt like when I was studying, everything was very fragmented. It was like, okay, here's this skill over here, we call it mindfulness, and we got to do this thing over here. And oh, and here's this skill over here, and we call it visualization, and we do those skills over here. Oh, and here's goal setting, and here's and it just felt like maybe a buffet of, like, tools.
Yeah.
But there was I felt like there was nothing that tied it all together and nothing that really organized it well. And a lot of this I kinda rely on my own experience, and so that I tell that in the book, right? My own experience, my education, obviously, a lot of the research that we conducted with Olympic medal winning athletes,
Yeah.
what we learned from those studies, and then my experience as a practitioner for the last 15, 20 years, right? I, uh, I've been fortunate to be part of Dr. Manning's team for a long time, and so he and I have been friends and colleagues for a long time. And he's been doing this at the highest level for years. He was with the Cleveland Cavaliers when they won in 2016. He was with the Milwaukee Bucks when they won in 21, and obviously he's been at BYU for years and years. So, like, I've had this guy that I've get to, like, mentor and shadow along the way. So what's been fun is we just taken a lot of those ideas and tried to build common themes and threads through all of the skills. So,
Yeah.
number one, I wrote it so I could organize my own mind,
Yeah.
take these fragmented pieces and put it all together. And then write it in a way so that, like, if you're a coach or if you're a player, like, I can hand this to you and it's not just a collection of cool stories. It's like a framework. It's like a guide that
Yeah.
then, like, you can you can read through once, but then you can come back to. I loved seeing in the Super Bowl. Was it Anthony Brown, Philadelphia Eagles, is, like, on the sideline and he's, like, cracking open the book
Yeah.
in the middle of the Super Bowl and
Yes.
the championship before that.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what I was thinking, and that's one of the things I was thinking in terms of, like, hey, can this be something that a player could come back to and reference? Like, oh, I need to build
Yeah.
confidence. Let me go back and review what is confidence and how do I build it, and which what language and what phrases and what skills can I apply here, right? Same thing with the skill of focus and the skill of decision making and motivation. And so those are the 2 reasons. Organize my own mind, give these players, athletes, coaches, and even parents a guide to building mental strength. So that's kind of why I wrote the book. But essentially, in terms of a sneak peek, it's I talk about my own experience. I talk about what is high performance, like what is performing at the highest level, and how we kind of unlock that from a mental perspective. And then I actually dive pretty deep into the neuroscience of the mind. I'm a big believer in you can't build mental strength without first knowing the mechanics of the mind. You got to know how to use it as a tool. You got to know how to control it and how to build it and how to shape it, right? Recent research in the psychology world, in the neuroscience world, has shifted our whole belief around it. For centuries, we believed that the mind was fixed and that it was, like, you got to a certain age and it was like, okay, that's it. And but now recent research, studies, experiments, right? We now know that the brain is plastic and it can be shaped and you can learn new skills and learn new things long into your older ages, right? And so I kind of dissect the mechanics of the mind to then apply it to, okay, here's the mental strength of confidence, and here's the physical skills or the tactical skills you do to build it and apply it, but here's what also is happening in the brain. Here's how the mind is reorganizing and shaping itself, right? And then throughout the book, I will contrast that with like all the mental blocks, or usually where a player, like, breaks down, right? And so throughout the book, there's this theme around, we're wiring intelligence. That's the name of the book. We're wiring intelligence. You're building these skills, you're building these habits, you're rewiring your brain. And there's 2 types of patterns. There are reactive patterns that get built and habit. Sorry. There's reactive patterns that get built and happen just because you're a person experiencing life, right? Guy cuts you off on the freeway, like, you have a reaction to that. If you react the same way over and over and over, you're going to build a pattern. You're going to build a habit. It's the same thing in sport. Like as a young athlete, I was very fiery. Oftentimes, if I was like playing basketball and I drove to the basket and I got fouled and the foul didn't get called, I was like grabbing the ball and kicking it into the stands. I was emotionally out of control is probably a good way to describe it. Matt, you probably can relate a little bit, right? Like you
I
strike
can.
out in the batter's box and you're like, oh, in the bat.
Oh yeah.
The point in sharing this is really like if you repeat that habit over and over and over again, your brain's objective. Like it doesn't understand this is a harmful pattern or a helpful pattern. It just knows, okay, when Matt strikes out, I'm throwing the bat over at the dugout, right? Um, and so if you repeat that over and over and over again, you're building a reactive pattern, a reactive habit. So I call that reactive intelligence. I go through lots of sports scenarios and lots of different use cases where here's what happens. And if we're disciplined about training our mind, those patterns are going to happen. They're going to happen. You're always building habits, whether it's happening by default or whether you're intentionally building it, right? And so set that up. I set up kind of here's all the reactive patterns we build as players, as athletes, right? In the different scenarios. And then I contrast that with here's the proactive patterns and thinking habits that you can build to combat them, override them, the reactive patterns, and really unlock your physical skills. And there's actually real neuroscience connected to both of these, right? If we're thinking reactively, the brain interprets that as a threat, it interprets that as danger, and it will activate that fight or flight response in the mind, and then that part of your brain will hijack you. A good way, like Matt, this is good because you're both baseball guys, right? What happens, Brandon, when you throw the ball and you hit Matt, right?
Boy. Yeah.
Like there's some reactive patterns that come from that.
Right.
I was actually just watching a whole bunch of clips of batters charging the mound in those scenarios. And then the last clip was obviously the most recent one by Shohei Ohtani, where he gets hit and then he like shakes it off, walks to the first base, and then he's like doing this back to the crowd. He's like, no, we're good. Like back to the dugout, I guess. Right. That's a whole different reaction, right? One of those is reactive. The other is very proactive. And we get to choose and control in those moments. But if we're not disciplined in building that habit, like Shohei probably was, we're going to charge the mound.
Yeah.
Right. But if we are disciplined, maybe we're walking to first base and we're shaking it off. What's so awesome about this is one of those patterns helps you perform great. It unlocks pieces in the brain like memory recall, problem solving and decision making, spatial awareness, and emotional regulation. Like it unlocks that part of the brain, which are all essential things that we need to perform our very best, right? The reactive part of our brain hijacks it, blocks all of those skills, and now you're not going to perform your best, right? So like throughout the whole book, I kind of go through each mental strength and I layer in this pattern of here's the reactive side and here's the proactive side. And you as a player, like here's how we build the proactive side.
Yeah, no, I love that. And a sneak peek into that book. I'm excited for its release. I'll definitely be reading that. That sounds awesome. I'm amped to jump into that. But I think you brought up something pretty unique and I think kind of like an interesting topic in the world of sport where you were like, you were an emotional athlete. And I think I speak for Matt and myself as we were the same. We're in the same boat. I think very passionate, caring a lot. Like if I strike someone out in a big outing, I'm going to, be excited, be motivated. I was also very fiery. So I think there's a lot of discourse about, there's one train of thinking for a lot of people. You probably heard it's like, get mad, use that fire, X, Y, and Z. And then there's this other where it's like, no, you should be stoic. And, the place of your motivation shouldn't come from, I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to prove him wrong, that type of thing. I'd love to hear your, I guess, philosophy behind that, or how maybe you might coach an athlete that does have that belief of like, I got to use my anger and my fire and all this to, go out and execute and be the best that I can. Like, how do you balance that for someone?
Yeah, it's such a big question. And this in part is why like I wrote the book and why I do what I do, right? Because it's not like, hey, here's the magical one answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're talking about a concept, emotion, which arguably in the psychology world, like we don't know everything about it.
Yeah.
And there's competing thoughts about emotion, right? Some people believe, hey, this thing is random. They show up when they show up. You don't have any control over them. And then there's other competing thoughts that are like, nope, you do control them. They're constructed in memory, and you can regulate them and control them and manage them, right? And so I tend to lean, right? This might not surprise you. I lean more to the side of really the research that Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett has done in terms of emotions are constructed in the mind, right? There is a physiological response that happens with them, but emotion, the feeling, happens in the mind. And if it happens in the mind, then you can control it. You can direct it, you can dictate it, right? And that speaks to a little bit what you're describing, Brandon, in the sense of like, do you want to raise your emotional levels? Do you want to raise your energy levels and be angry and be, compete at that level? Or do you want to be more stoic, right? And it the real answer is it's unique to every player, right? Some guys got to be amped, play angry, and some guys got to be calm, stoic, and neutral, right? And so the way we train players actually is say, like, here's the neuroscience of it, here's the skills, here's how we control all of it. But what we have to do is figure out what works for you, right? And Brandon, I'm not exactly sure which side of the, if we drew like an inverted U right here, if we're more on the calm side or if we're more on the amped up side.
Amped up side.
But yeah, but like I work with a lot of pitchers. I work with a lot of hitters too, Matt. I work with a lot of pitchers, and I get every variation of the spectrum. I get a guy out there, and he's like, "Man, I just have to feel relaxed and calm, and 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 just not get too amped up." And that's when my best stuff comes out. And I'm like, "Perfect. Here's how we dial that in." So I'm going to train that kid a lot different than I'm going to train a kid who's like, "No, no, I want to be amped on the mat." It's awesome. I was at the University of Missouri, kind of just a cool story here. I was at the University of Missouri, and I got to work with the baseball team while I was out there. And so I met a bunch of the guys, former players that came through, even players that that came through and are still playing. But one of them was Max Scherzer. I got to have this conversation with Max Scherzer, and this was through a friend of mine. His name is Hunter Mentz. He's actually the hitting coach for the Toronto Blue Jays, or one of the hitting coaches. Shout out to them. Congrats for them for making their big run this year. But one of the things we talked about in this conversation with Max was this exact thing. And he told this story about the first time he pitched in Yankee Stadium. You guys know this. Max, what type of pitcher is Max?
Fiery.
Amped times 100.
110 miles per hour, like he's pumped up, right? But he talked about the first time he got into the big leagues and pitching in Yankee Stadium, and he got some coaching and some feedback that said, "Hey, you got to be neutral. You got to be calm. It's Yankee Stadium. There's history here. It's a big environment. Like, you got to be calm." So he went into that outing that way, and he stunk for the first 1 or 2 or 3 innings. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he's like, "I was terrible for the first couple of innings." Goes to the dugout, finally kind of figures out, "I'm not a calm pitcher. I got to be amped," right? So he starts going through his process and getting his skills dialed up, and then goes back out there and pitches the Max Scherzer way and has a great outing the rest of the outing, right? But that's where this skill gets a little bit unique, in terms of, like, Brandon, you might be amped up, but Matt, we got to be a little bit more calm. I was like right in the middle. I wanted to be energized, but I knew I needed to be a little bit stoic, right? So that's what I would say there. Now, one thing I would always caution a player is anytime you start to get into those emotions that are like anger or those higher level, potentially negative emotions, those are tied to the fight or flight response. So you will actually activate that fight or flight response. Your brain will interpret that there's threat or there's danger, or which that can then lead to higher levels of stress and anxiety, higher levels of higher levels of muscle tension, which then restricts the blood flow, which then what happens to our performance, right? Goes down. The key here is, can you stay in a relaxed physiological state, but have high energy or controlled energy, right? Like, the key is whatever energy level I bring, is my body physiologically relaxed, activated, and dialed in, right? Like, that's the key. As soon as you start to go a little bit too far, actually on both ends of the spectrum, as soon as you're too calm and you're not activated enough, you're going to perform bad. If you're on the other side and you're overactivated, you're angry and you're frustrated, like, your performance is going to suffer. So, like, that's where the two extremes get us in trouble. So that's the only caution I would share with a player is, like, if you get too angry, that could get you in trouble. but it is one of the skills that is unique to every player.
We want to take a quick second to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, New Jersey. Whether it's picking up a snack between games or picking up a party tray for the big game, the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton has you covered. For all of your pretzel needs, make sure you stop by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, located on North Maple Ave. Let them know that the ARC podcast sent you. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. Dr. Lowe, my next question, because we have touched on kind of the work that you do, but not necessarily, I guess, specifically in the NCAA landscape. So I know you have mentioned you work with a multitude of different athletes in different sports. And then I guess the second layer of that, so I hate to do these, but it's kind of a two-part question.
Yeah.
So your approach mentally going into working with athletes in different sports, right? Like, how do you approach each session knowing, like, I might be working with, let's say, a volleyball player today, and then tomorrow a football player, and then today a tennis player? Like, obviously that's much different. And then the added layer I would love to hear you talk about too, which I don't think is talked about enough, is now NIL is really prevalent. And that's a whole new layer of added pressure, added decision making, added all this. It turns this, amateur, whatever side you're on this topic, right? It's very controversial, but it adds an extra layer of pressure to these athletes. How have you kind of navigated as a coach in, like, I guess, having the discussions, not necessarily about like, what do you do with NIL, but like how they navigate that situation? So I guess from your end, the two parts of the question are, how do you work with different athletes in different sports and kind of approaching those sessions? And then the second piece is, now that NIL has become so prevalent, how do you, I guess, approach working with athletes on the mental side of how to deal with that?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool questions. I like these questions. The first piece I would say on the working with different athletes, the one thing I'd say is the psychology is all the same. The principles are all the same. Really where the rubber meets the road is how well can you then translate the skills, the mental skills, the mental strengths into the language of their sport, right? And so I've been doing this for a long time. Anybody that's really, 10, 15, 20 years into this has probably worked with enough athletes that they can start to translate the skill into their sport, right? And actually, even in baseball, right? Matt, the way I would work with you as a hitter in the batter's box would have different language than Brandon, you on the mound as a pitcher, right? You could argue that like it's a unique sport in that both of those skills are like two different sports in themselves, right?
Yeah,
Right.
true.
And so I would work with you different, but the skills would be the same. Here's how you direct your attention. Here's the specific skills and tasks you need to focus on, right? So we'd be talking about the skill of focus, but we'd be using different language. We'd be talking about hitting versus pitching, right? And so that's the piece that translates across every different sport, a volleyball player to a football player to, you name it. And so for me, I study sport. Like I try to learn the languages of every sport. And a lot of times I'll ask a player, like, they'll describe something. Volleyball players, I've worked a couple of years now with volleyball players, and it took me a while to start to understand like their language on when they high point the ball above the net, right? Like, they would say things like high hands, and I'm like, tell me what that means.
Yeah.
So then they would describe, okay, here's what that means. I'm like, okay, I got it. I now know the skill. Here's how we apply the mind and the mental side behind that skill.
Mhm.
So that's the answer to that first question. Skills are the same, but translating them into the different sport specific language, like that's the key. Okay, NIL. Now, here's something that's unique. One of the things that we do in the sports psychology field is we spend a lot of time teaching players how to manage and control and eliminate mental interference. Now, the good news is mental interference has been around forever, and we could list all of them. Like it could be the weather, it could be the thing that your parents say to you before you go to the game. It could be something a coach says. It could be the other team. It could be the rankings. It could be the field you're playing at. Like it could be your own internal dialogue, your self-doubt, and your criticism. Like the list of mental interference is wildly long. So when NIL came out, what did we do? We just added another thing to the list. Okay. So it didn't necessarily change what we do in terms of helping players manage and eliminate and reduce that interference. It just added a new topic to talk about, right? Like now you're being paid, and now everybody's being paid at these different levels. And it introduces a thing where you may feel like some of this is unfair. Like that guy gets paid more than me, but my numbers are better than him over here? Like, why am I not picked? The good news is I've worked with a number of professional athletes at the professional levels, and like we have that form of interference at that level, and so a lot of the things we've learned from that level, we're just now applying here at the collegiate level. And so the is a new topic for us, but in terms of what the skill is and reducing the mental interference around it, like that's very, very similar. It'd be the same thing at like playing time. Hey, my numbers are better than that guy, but that guy gets more playing time than I do, right? Or I think I should be starting, but that person is starting, right? But now it's just dollars and cents instead of minutes.
Yeah. Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. I feel like that's a topic that isn't necessarily talked about a lot. AL has talked about, every which way. If you're a fan of, especially college football, you probably hear the term NIL every single sentence when you're having a
Yeah.
conversation. But
We talk about it a lot. I will say this.
yeah,
The thing that is hard to keep up with is how fast this landscape is changing
yeah,
literally day to day, month to month, year to year, right? Like when NIL first came out, there wasn't a lot of rules and regulations around it, but like the way we managed that interference was this way, but now they've added a whole bunch of more elements. So the way we manage it today is a little bit unique. So I'm sure next year it's going to be different. I'm sure the year after that, until we get to arguably until we get to probably salary caps,
yeah.
Right.
roster limits, and contracts, like this thing's gonna be the wild, wild west for a while.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, and sorry, I have one more question before we get to the Fast Five
You're good.
segment.
Fire away.
You have a lot of topics, and now like we're going through it, and it's a lot of more questions are coming up. This is great. But being a fan of college football, the first thing that came to mind when I'm thinking of BYU and your work with BYU, like big fan of Coach Sataki and his work and kind of how he approaches, I guess, how he coaches and the way that his players look up to him, the way that the community there looks up to him. So I guess, what does your work look like with the coaches at BYU? And then maybe a little sneak peek for me, who's a fan of college football, what the work with maybe Coach Sataki and the players look like from that front as well.
Yeah. I got a couple of ways to answer this. So number one, BYU, like I feel a little bit lucky in that BYU invests a lot of money or just resources into the mental side of sport. Okay. So
Yes.
we actually have 6 full-time people there at BYU. 2 of them are 100% dedicated to the clinical mental health side of things, right? So the therapy side of things, right? And then we have 4 that are dedicated to the mental performance, right? The clinical side, there's assigned to every team. Like they don't have team assignments or anything like that. The mental performance side, because our demand is really high, like we have team assignments, right? That being said, football, like football is all hands on deck, right? And I think this is probably the same for every program out there. But what's been really, really good is that Coach, Kalani and the other members of the staff love the mental side, right? So they're supportive of it. They're encouraging players to meet with people. They're bringing us in. Like it's been very, very good from that standpoint. And we've seen a little bit of a shift in mindset over the last few years about this, but for a long time there was a lot of stigmas around mental health and mental performance training, right? People would think like I was training about I graduated in 2009. So what is that? 15 years ago, 16 years ago? Yeah, even when I was in college and training, there was this stigma of like, oh, you have to go see, you're going and working with somebody on the mind. Yeah, like you must be broken.
Yeah.
Something must be wrong with you, right? I think we've made landslides of progress in eliminating some of those stigmas where now mental health and mental strength is being pulled into programs just like athletic training, just like strength and conditioning. Like we're making a lot of progress there. Are we as deep as those other 2 disciplines? We're not quite there, but we're making a lot of progress. And so, but a lot of that depends on the coach, right? Kalani's a guy that loves it, buys it, wants it, so he's pulling us in, right? So in terms of support and structure there, that's been a lot of fun, right? In terms of like working with their staff, because they know the mental side is pretty important, they wanted it, it makes it super easy, right?
Yeah.
We have, it's all hands on deck. There's the 3 of us that spend a lot of more of our primary time there. We'll travel with the team doctors. Like we send one guy at least to every game, and then at home games, like So there's a lot of and even beyond acceptance, this willingness to just like bring it in, right? So that's my in terms of working with those guys on the staff, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Full transparency, we were a little bit nervous Penn State was going to steal him.
Yeah.
A few days in there, everybody was like, we got it. We got to keep our guys.
Right.
Got to
Right.
keep our guys to do the best we can to keep our guys. The toughest piece, and I'll share a little insight just in the university. We're a church-run institution. So the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is essentially the board of directors and the chairman of BYU and the athletic program here. So what that means is like because we're not big on like, hey, just throwing around tons of money and big dollars. The mission of the church and the mission of the university is bigger than athletics over
Right.
here, right? And so what that means is like our coaches are not the highest paid coaches in the country. Our players are not the highest paid players in the country. Like we have AJ DeBansta is here, right? Top 3, I think he's the best prospect in basketball right now. But like he's not making the most money compared to and actually guys, I don't know if you follow a lot, but like his dad was pretty open about saying like, hey, that wasn't the biggest paycheck. We went
Right.
to
Yeah.
BYU for a lot of these other reasons.
Right.
And, I mean, don't get me wrong, like he does plenty fine
Yeah. Yeah. Of
for
course.
being a student athlete here. But like our quarterbacks, right? Our wide receivers, our top prospects, it is not uncommon for a player to leave BYU and go and be paid more somewhere else. And so that's actually like a thing we have to navigate and a thing we have to, just I guess the best word is navigate. Like we just have to navigate it.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love to hear kind of the acceptance. Cause again, I think your experience, I graduated college in 2018, Matt as well. Even when I was in college, that was kind of the thought process about, speaking with a sports psychologist or a mental performance coach. It was like, what's wrong with you? What's going on? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, why are you doing that? So I really love to hear when programs are like really embracing that. And now it's not like there's no stigma. It's like this is just a part of the game that we can improve and get better on. And, sky's the limit if we can kind of, get better at this. So that's great.
And it really helps when you have the resources. So like I attend a lot of the practices. I don't travel all the time, mostly because I have I have 5 kids and a family. And like, if I'm traveling with baseball this weekend and golf that weekend and basketball this week, like I wouldn't see my family. So
Yeah.
Right.
try not
Right.
to do it. But like I'm at practice, I'm on the sideline. We see these kids all the time. We see the coaches all the time. So because we have enough resources and we're integrated into the staff and the teams, like it's just way more acceptance and collaboration when you can get that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love to hear that. And I love the space continuing to grow. So that's awesome. But I think this is a perfect time to jump into our Fast Five segment. So I alluded to this with you beforehand, but 5 semi-rapid fire questions on mental performance in sports, kind of the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you these questions. And then, whenever you're ready, we'll get started.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Awesome. All right. Question 1. What part of your identity did sports help you discover?
There was a lot, but I think the piece that it helped me discover, like in hindsight, I don't have to be the biggest, fastest, strongest, most athletic guy to still go and be a great athlete. And so just kind of maybe this is the underdog mentality, right? But like not being the biggest, fastest guy, but then knowing, okay, how do I get to this level? It's effort, it's training, it's mastering skills, it's mastering physical and mental skills, right? And I think just knowing that if I can go, and really this is the skill of belief, it's self-belief, right? The first skill we train. If I can go and do that on the track, then I can do that in any other domain in my life. And short story, because I'm full of stories and I shouldn't be telling another story. This is the Fast Five, and I'm like,
No, of course.
was a dumb kid. I was a dumb kid. By academic standards, like I barely got over the threshold of like, passing high school, getting into college, full transparency. My first 2 semesters after in college, I was put on academic probation and like threatened to like, hey, you got to fix your grades, you're out of here.
Yeah.
And so like that was another area where as I learned, okay, here's how the mind works and here's how I can apply these skills. I went from being a stereotypical dumb jock, like not smart kid to, now I have 4 college degrees, 3 graduate degrees, a PhD. I'm writing a book, and like I've learned to how to apply a lot of that stuff, right? So for me, I think sport taught me just this unrelenting self-belief. Like,
Yeah.
well, if I can climb to this level here, I could do that as a father, I could do that as a husband, I could do that as an academic, I could do that as a business person. So I think that's the piece of my identity. It probably gets me in too much trouble because I just think I can do anything. Although, you guys Puka Nakua fans?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you hear what he recently said about, like, thinking he could go and play in the NBA? Did you guys hear?
Yes,
Yes.
I did hear that.
Yeah,
Yes, I did hear that. Yes.
I heard that. Everybody else is like, "You're crazy." And I'm like, "Yes, I love that. Like, go get it." And
Yeah.
but I think you have to have this, like, delusional self-belief a little bit, right? To
Yeah.
climb to the highest levels of a sport or a discipline, like, you kinda have to just believe, "Hey, I can get there."
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think a lot of those transferable skills, like you said, from that you've learned in sport take over everywhere in life. So, dude, I love that. I appreciate that. Now, question number 2. Looking back, what moment felt like the end for you, but ended up just being a new beginning?
I would say, like, the transition from so there's a little bit of heartbreak here. In 2008, barely missed the Olympic trials, okay? And arguably, like essentially what they do is they'll take the you have to hit a qualifying mark, and then they'll take the top 20 athletes, and they'll take those to the Olympic trials. It may be a little bit different now. At least that's what it was then. And I was sitting at 21 in the list. And so I'm like, "Dang, that's a heartbreaker." So, like, then in 2008, I'm thinking, "Okay, great. I'm still in college. Like, I can still chase this. I can still go run at this. I got 2012. Like, that's the goal, right? So reset the objectives, reset the goals. We're chasing 2012." And I start progressing. I start getting better. In non-Olympic years, they have what's called a U.S. championship. So it's the same thing as an Olympic trials, but not the Olympics. You're still trying to make a world team. You're going to go and compete in a world championship. So I ended up qualifying for 2 of those, 2 US championships leading up to 2012. And then late 2011, I got this foot injury that required me to have to get surgery. And so you think about the season, right? You get surgery in December, like your competition is July.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys ever had surgeries, but, like, that would be a pretty remarkable turnaround to then get back to, like, your ability to perform at your very best level. So I essentially ran out of time. I ran out of time recovering from that injury and didn't get a chance to go to compete in, I think it was in Oregon that year, but compete in Eugene at the Olympic trials and take a shot. Now, full transparency, I was bottom of the list. You got to be top 3 to make a team. I was probably a stretch for making a team, but, like, being there to me would have felt like a huge win. So missing on that goal
Yeah.
was a huge heartbreak, but it also was the springboard into, okay, now I'm going to go study sports psychology. I'm moving out to Missouri to study with Dr. Rick McGuire, and, like, I'm chasing this thing full on.
Yeah. No, I love to hear that. That's great. Now, number 3, when everything around you is chaotic, what's one habit that brings you back to center?
Yeah, so this really is the essence of mental strength training, right? If you can control your thoughts and your emotions, and you're proactive about it, anything that happens to you, any external factor, you basically become immune to because you have the mental strength to navigate it, right? So, like, I think about, okay, like, what if I wanted to go start this business, right? It's a math equation. Do these tasks, do these inputs, see these results, right? But where people get distracted is when they let that mental interference come into place. So I would say I would say it's not one skill, it's probably the collection of all the mental strengths that help me navigate when things get chaotic. But then it's also the perception of chaos.
Yeah.
Like like that in and of itself is a belief that we get to build and create, right? So here's a cool story. Are you guys Jocko Willink fans?
Yes.
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 So I love his stuff. I read his book. Oh gosh, why am I forgetting the name of his book? Extreme Ownership,
hmm
right? Extreme Ownership. And Jocko Willink is a military guy, right? Like, he led SEAL team, I want to say 3, one of them. But he essentially is the commander of a SEAL team, right? So we could all probably agree that's the essence of chaos. Like, when you're in a military setting, live combat zone, like, that's probably chaos. The definition of chaos, right? But what I love about even him and telling his stories and what he describes is that they train and train and train and create the repetitions that then lead to what I'll call automatic responses under stress. Okay. That allow them to just execute clean and efficient in a setting that's chaotic. So he talks about in his book, he talks about the Battle of Ramadi and how they had to go through the city and like clear the whole city. And they would do this move, this maneuver called cover and move, right? So you have a team of 7, 8 guys, they got to move from one spot to another spot, cover. Someone jumps up, lays down cover fire, guys move, they do the same thing the rest of the group moves. They do this exercise to move through a whole town and clear it, right? And the way they would train is they would introduce chaotic events, right? They would say things like, "Okay, now your radios are dead. Now you got to do this same maneuver. Okay, one of your men was hit with a bullet, and now you got to carry him through this maneuver, right? Okay, now there's enemy fire happening. Now you got to maneuver this thing." But they do that over and over and over again. They basically train their mind so that they can automatically respond in that chaotic moment
Right.
with proactive intelligence. That's what I call it, right? Instead of, look, if I was ever in a combat zone and somebody was shooting bullets, guess what I'm doing? I'm out of there. My fight or flight response is taken over and I'm gone.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I love about mental strength, right? And I would say for me personally, right? And I'm not perfect at it. I think training the mind is a lifelong journey. But I think the thing that I can rely on when things get chaotic is, hey, I know how to think in chaos. I know how to think when chaos shows up. I also perceive chaos differently. Maybe it's a challenge to embrace. Maybe it's an opportunity to overcome, right? Instead of seeing chaos as a threat or danger or something to run away from, right? But that's why I love the military examples because they are literally in an environment where you could say this is chaos, and their response, their automatic response is proactive instead of reactive.
Right. No, I love that. And yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic example of just how to utilize that and why that's important. I mean, that's awesome. Number 4, what belief about yourself did you have to unlearn in order to grow as an athlete or a person?
Yeah, that everything wasn't fixed.
Yeah.
For me, for a long time, I believed, like, okay, your gifts and talents are fixed. Like, you either have them or you don't. And so, like, you're either going to be a great athlete or you're not, right? And I also believe that about my intelligence, the academic side. You're either smart or you're not, and that was fixed. And what I learned really when I was about 21, right, like a little bit older, but as a college athlete, I learned, hey, oh, the mind is not fixed. The mind is flexible. It's plastic. It reorganizes itself all the time. You could like do any of you speak in another language, like a second language?
I don't.
No,
I wish I did.
Yeah,
learn
I don't
Spanish.
either, but all 3 of us right now, like, could go and learn like, I'm blown away by the people that speak, like, 4 or 5,
Yeah.
7
Same.
different languages, right?
Yeah.
But, like, all of that is just a skill, and with effort, and with energy, and with practice, and repetition, that was the thing I had to unlearn. I had to unlearn, essentially, that the belief is not or the belief in my skills and ability and my intelligence is not fixed, and that they can be grown.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I love that one. And then last question, number 5. So what does success feel like to you now? And how has that changed since you were an athlete?
Yeah, right. This one's an interesting one because it shifts. A lot of times we start to define success as an athlete by these stupid things over here, right? The trophies and the medals and the, records and whatever. And that really is not what success is, right? It's not money, it's not prestige, it's not trophies. And even though society, I mean, quite honestly, society sells us a lie when it
Yeah.
comes to that. And
Right.
and so really for me, what I had to learn, because like don't get me wrong, I wanted to chase the trophies and the money and
Yeah.
I want like don't get me wrong, I that carried me a long way. But halfway through that journey, it switched to instead of the trophies and the awards, and it switched to self mastery and just seeing like really how good of a jumper could I be? Like, uh, I know you can't tell on the screen, but I'm not an intimidating guy. I'm 5'10", I'm 170 pounds. Like, I'm not an intimidating guy. And I'm out there on the track against guys that have won Olympic medals and have set world records. And they're 6'2" and 6'4", and
Yeah.
they look like Spartans from
Yes.
right, from the movies, and I was not that guy. And so for me, it shifted to, hey, I want to see how good I can become. Success was more about mastery of skills, right? And it shifted to, okay, can I master my physical skills? Can I master my mental and emotional skills? And then for me, I'm a big faith guy, right? So then it was, can I master my spiritual skills, right? And so like that's what had to shift for me. And quite honestly, like I would say every player, every athlete, if you can make that shift and you're not so driven by the extrinsic pieces and you're more driven by the intrinsic pieces, the internal pieces, like you're gonna have a more fulfilling experience chasing a big dream. And don't get me wrong, I think it's amazing to chase big dreams. I think everyone should go and do it and strive to accomplish something and chase a big dream. But do it because you want to do it. Do it with your own definition of success. And that is, I want to master skills. I want to be around great people that I get to be around, build positive relationships. I want to do it because it's meaningful and it brings purpose to me, right? So those are some of the things that I would say that really for me had to shift, right? Like you gotta first define like, hey, what does success mean? And then go and chase that. And what's fun is I get to chase that in every domain, right?
Yeah.
As a dad, as a husband, as a community member here in my area, as a mental performance doctor training elite level athletes how to unlock their skills. I don't pole vault anymore, but I do play a lot of basketball. So like I am, in those 40-year-old old man basketball, trying to be the best, player I can be out there, right? But it's more about doing it for the right reasons and not what the world might define as like this is what success is.
Yeah. No, I think that was beautifully said.
Awesome.
And I think, definitely something I've been reflecting on more. And I know Matt and I have had these conversations of reflection on that because I think that's a big piece. Both of us were so driven by things like that, where it's like, you got to be all conference. You got to do X, Y, and Z. You got to be pitcher or hitter of the year in your conference. And, at the end of the day, the things that matter are the takeaways that you have with your team, what the relationships that you made. Like the best thing you could do is look back at your time at school or playing a sport and be like, man, the memories that I have, the relationships I've built, the characteristics that I can take away from that time is really what matters. Cause at the end of the day, kind of like you alluded to with the trophies and everything, at the end of the day, they just end up on shelves, right?
Yeah.
Where the
Or in
relationships that you
a
have
box.
or in a box, right? Yeah, or in a box, or in a box. So I think, it's important that those conversations are had. I loved the way that you were able to kind of articulate that. So thank you for that. But Dr. Lowe, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. This was an awesome conversation and loved to hear your passion for this topic because Matt and I, love talking about this stuff. So it's really cool to, share that with some like-minded people and hearing, your philosophies, your vision, your mission and everything. It's awesome. And, we're really appreciative for your time and sharing your journey and everything. So also drop your social medias if you can for any listeners so they can kind of give you a follow and keep up with what you're doing.
Yeah, so you can find me on social. It's at Dr. Bobby Lowe, DrBobbyLow. So I think I'm the same across all of them at Dr. Bobby Lowe. But yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much again. Really appreciate it. This was an awesome conversation. And yeah,
Yeah, I
thank you
enjoyed
so
it.
much.
Appreciate you guys. No, this was fun. Great
This is great.
questions. Love that you guys are baseball guys. Yeah, no, this was a great conversation.
This is awesome. Thank you so much again. I appreciate
you.
it.